Motion to get him back into committee of the whole.
Second.
I have a motion to resume the committee of the whole meeting and to come out of recess from Councilman Lundin and a second from Councilman Holmgren. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 3-0. So we left off at E6, requiring updated surveys for new fences. And I guess, I think our thought was kind of that we wanted to make the language a little bit more vague and say, let's go a foot off of the property line unless you work something else out with your neighbor. And if you have city infrastructure within that area, that you would have to have it located and talk with us about it to make sure it's not damaged. And that we wouldn't require a survey. Does that sum it up pretty good? Or am I
Yeah,
pretty-
you have to be so far off city infrastructure so we can dig it up at future time.
Which is 5 feet.
5 feet.
Yeah.
That's what I understood it as.
Okay. So guys, it was, just to kind of recap what I just said, I guess, it was gonna be, we're gonna make the language more vague, so we're gonna say it's a foot off the property line unless you work something else out with your neighbor, and it's not our problem as far as that in-between space. And then we're not gonna require a survey, but if you have city infrastructure within that easement, then we wanna locate it, and it'll have to be 5 feet off of that locate.
And the resident are they,
And no survey.
responsible for locates at all when they're digging posts?
Well, they would just call,
They have to call
They're
him.
required, they have to
Okay,
call
good.
for locates regardless.
yeah. Does that sort of fix the problem, or does it make it worse, or is it?
I think-
I just have a problem with
I think
doing the
it's-
surveys.
I think it's a different direction, which I'm fine with. I just also want to have the discussion and to make you aware that we don't currently follow up with inspections of fences. We're not required to by ordinance. We do inspect signs, but we don't inspect fences unless we get a complaint at this time. So just making sure you're aware of that and that that's what you want us to continue doing, because we get a lot of questions about not inspecting fences. But we just don't have the manpower to inspect every fence and shed that goes in within every zoning permit, with there being 2 of us in this department. So just making you aware of that unless you want to give us an alternate direction. Usually when people ask why we don't do that, I just say we are trusting our residents that they're gonna do what they say they're gonna do, and unless we hear otherwise, we just assume that is what happens. So usually people are pretty pleased to hear that statement, but otherwise.
I think the less restrictions we have on it, the safer our infrastructure actually is, because if I were to say, or even any other resident, if you were to say you have to have a survey, well, you're not gonna go pay $1,000, you're just gonna put in the fence without a permit and hope you don't get caught without a permit, and if you do, you pay double the fee, and there it is. So I think it actually, by making it less restrictive, it protects our infrastructure better, because now people will be like, well, all I have to do is call the city for a locate, big deal. You know, so I think it's actually better for us and the residents to do it that way. But now, as far as property line disputes, I think that is a civil issue, and, I mean, take it to court.
Right.
People take people to court every day, if that's what it comes down to. I don't think the city is really responsible for something.
It's not gonna appease the people that are calling you guys and are upset and want you to fix the problem, but at least it actually removes us from the problem.
Right.
You know, which right now, like Joe said, we're kind of involving ourselves in the problem by making them negotiate with their neighbor in the first place, right? So, yeah, probably doesn't solve everything you're hoping to solve, but I mean,
You're always gonna have issues when houses are this
Well-
close together.
Right.
We'll change the language to make it more vague, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Do you want it to come back to the committee or planning commission? Because it has to go through planning commission
I think
for
it
this
probably could just go to
zoning.
planning.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to planning commission with those changes, and then we can discuss if there's anything else there.
Sounds great.
And we'll clean up the ordinance as we always do, so.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. All right, moving on to E7. This is Luke's here, city equipment running unoccupied.
Yes, so I have seen on Facebook and gotten a couple messages as well about city equipment running. I know I had talked to Josie briefly about this and got some clarification. So I'd just like to know, I guess, Travis just get an explanation? I know most of the reasons why, but why are the police cruisers running all the time? It's a very common question, so I'd just like to get an explanation. I know the answers already, but
Yeah, there's a few reasons. I mean, the biggest reason is obviously we need to go now. So what are the reasons? So one of the reasons we'll talk about is, council approved us to carry Narcan. Well, now we're required to. We don't have an option. Narcan is temperature sensitive. I have it somewhere between 60 and 90 degrees-ish storage. So that's one thing, right? So that was the biggest reason before we didn't have it, and that was kind of the concern we had to get it, if it goes below 60 or above 90, somewhere in there. But generically, there has to be temperature stable to be vital. So if it gets too cold or too hot, we actually administer it, it's not workable anymore. So that's one issue. But we can't choose not to carry Narcan now, because it is a law that we have to. So we're kind of puts in a predicament there, but that's one piece. The other piece we have is, our body can't, well, overall, there's a lot of electronics in a police car. I mean, you can imagine that. It just wasn't like that years ago, but now with GPS cameras, radios, everything. So there's a lot of draw. So you shut your car down, those units have to shut down on timers. I think our cameras are on 10-minute timer, something like that, because if it goes over 10 minutes, you're drawing too much. So with the cameras, if we shut our squad car down, it goes into the 10-minute shutdown. When our officer gets in the car, they're gonna turn their car on, and then they're gonna sit there for 4 minutes while their cameras boot. So their body camera, their squad camera will work. It takes that long to go through the booting sequence to actually get their camera up.
that's wild. That blows my mind. You
We
think
could
it'd be
get by
instant.
with a computer, supposedly, I suppose you get by with a computer not working without giving you the updated CAD information, but there's a issue with that too, where there's information coming across the screen when they're coming. So the computer's a whole nother issue, but the body camera one is, when we went to those body cameras, the whole fact that once those shut down, you're 4 minutes out.
And that's not okay, right?
Right, so you're just
Absolutely
sitting
not.
there.
You're right.
Waiting, because again, if we get into a critical incident and they say, well, why weren't your body cameras on? We're like, well, we didn't let it boot up. Do you think that's a good enough explanation on a critical incident when somebody's asking why we don't have body camera footage? So that, then the computer GPS, same thing. I mean, it's just, once it goes into a shutdown, think about it, you turn the car off with that much electronics pulling, you only have an infinite time before those units need to start shutting down, and then by turning them back on. So that's the reasons that they need to go. It's not because we don't want a hot or cold car, creature comforts isn't the piece of the puzzle. It's the fact that, law enforcement needs to go when they go. We don't have the luxury of waiting, that 2, 3, 4 minutes to get our stuff running. As well as the Narcan, that's a whole new element that we have. That was part of the reason I was a little apprehensive when we started it, because I don't know how that was gonna work, but, those are the reasons.
And defibrillators as well are a little bit more temperature sensitive.
They're better than they used to be, but that's still a consideration, because of defibrillators, but they're better than they used to be. The old ones, if you varied on them, it'd take too much time. Actually, our squad computers, like, when you start at the beginning of your shift, if stored outside, you would wait 10, 15 minutes, because with that solid
Solid-state drive, hard drive.
Yep, there's a heater in there. Same concept, we got too hot. Then there's a cooler, so you gotta wait for that, and that can take up to 10 to 20 minutes. So it's because you're running a mobile office with a lot of high technology pieces of equipment.
Okay, and then a good explanation on that. I think that's fair.
Yes.
Another question that I've had, and I've actually had an issue with it myself, the police cars sitting on the public road with no lights on, especially on 65 off of Palomino and Towns Edge Road. I know they're there trying to get unsuspecting drivers, but I think it's a safety issue. Is there a law in Minnesota that requires them, if they're on the public roadway, to have their lights on of some kind?
There's a law, I don't have it printed, but there's a law that exempts law enforcement lighting, so they don't have to.
Could we have the city make it a practice to have those lights on? Because I've almost hit a cruiser that was sitting in Palomino and 65 in that little area there. If you're not totally paying attention in the dark, especially the black ones, and there's no lights on, no reflection that you can really easily see with no headlight pointed at it, I would rather see us have our parking lights on like most police departments do.
I guess the only one that would be State Patrol. They a lot of them do. We give our officers a lot of discretion as far as we let them carry guns to take lives. And now we're saying we can't give them discretion to figure out where a safe place to park the car is. So there's kind of a balance in that. I mean, that's,
I don't know, I think that's kind of an extreme comparison.
well, no, I'm just saying, we trust our officers to have enough common
Obviously.
sense. We're trusting our officers to have enough common sense to be safe with something to that extreme, but yet we're saying in this room that we don't think they have enough common sense on where to park a car.
Well, I'm not saying that, I just think it's a risk to even to our officers, if there's somebody that's driving, and I've come within a couple of feet of them, you don't even realize they're there sometimes, even if you're paying total attention at night, it's hard to see. And the state troopers evidently have a rule that the State Highway 65 is the biggest issue for me. The smaller city roads, I don't really care, but you're traveling at a state highway speed, so state troopers are required to have their driving lights on if they're anywhere within however 60 feet or whatever. So if you're on a state road, why shouldn't our police officer be held to the same standard?
Because that's a city policy, that wear them room
Right.
closed too. So
And that's what I'm saying, I think that would be something that I would like to look into. I've gotten a few complaints, and I've seen it myself. Just on 65, I think that's a big concern. I drive a lot late at night, so I see it constantly out there, and I don't know if.
And we do get complaints, with our vehicles parked places to catch speeders. People don't like that.
Oh, yeah.
But then again, we just had discussions last week or 2 weeks ago about speed enforcement, so I don't know
I'm not
which
worried
direction
about-
we want to go.
I'm not worried about that. I think it's just the safety side of it. I don't know that it's necessarily safe to have a police car on a public road. I mean, you're 5 feet off of a lane without their lights on, and especially the ghost car, it's not that reflective, it's white, but,
It's actually just as reflective as the regular car.
okay, well, it's hard, I think it's harder to see, but I don't know. To me, I just think it would make more sense if we were on 65 to have the driving lights on at least, in my opinion.
I don't want to micromanage Travis. I think I trust him to make his decisions, and I think yeah, we could change the city code, but I mean, there's probably a reason that you guys are doing that too, right? And that you don't
There
have the
could be,
lights
and
on, right?
I don't
So,
even know how
mean,
often that happens.
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, I think if you just mention it to Travis, and if
Yeah.
there's a situation he thinks is a concern, then he can take it up with that officer or something along those lines, but
And
I
generically,
I
as far
trust
as
you guys to make the right decision.
public
and-
safety vehicles on the side of the road, the most dangerous place to be on the side of the road is, as well as fire, flashing lights.
Yeah,
Flashing lights
blind
draw
people,
on
too many of them.
impaired drivers. It's hard to comprehend that,
Okay.
but it's weird. If you think about, like, the troopers that I know that have gotten rocked pretty hard, then sitting on the side of the road with flashing lights by impaired drivers. Has to do with, the focusing and pulling you in. So
Well, I mean, when you're driving, I mean, they tell you not to stare at the headlights of the car next, because
Yeah.
it draws it that way, right?
I mean,
So,
anytime an emergency vehicle's on the side of the road, doing anything is dangerous to them.
I just want to clarify something. I agree with you, Mayor Gordon, Travis should have the discretion, but did you say that state patrols are required to keep their lights on or a set of lights on?
That's what he had just said.
Okay,
State
so,
Patrol, from what I recall, I mean, I don't want to
I know
quote
that
'cause I
was
read
a
it.
law in Minnesota.
It's not a law, it's a state
All right.
patrol policy. I'm pretty sure their policy is they have to have their parking lights on all the time, and they have to wear their hat when they get out of their car too.
can you look in, they have to have a reason why they have that
Right.
policy. Could you look into that and get back to council with that?
I can sure look into it. I can also look into the policy and why they wear their hat, if that's relevant.
I'm just seeing
I
if they
would.
see something that we don't see.
Yeah.
So,
That was my point, because other agencies across the state are required to do it, and I think it's a issue I've personally seen, so I just thought I'd bring it up. I've been meaning to bring it up, and I just thought that was maybe a good time to ask about it, since we're already talking about PD stuff. I guess that's really it. I know there was question about, public works equipment running. I kinda got an explanation on that, and I know Matt was gonna work on that, so I'm satisfied with E7 if anybody else has any questions.
All right. Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Travis, and Matt, and Josie.
All right, so moving on to E8, Park Code, or, go ahead.
Mayor, if I may interrupt, we do have Mr. Hasek, I'm not sure how to say his name, but he is with Solar Stone Development. He is here. If it's up to you if you want to, I'm not sure if we'd have time for his presentation. We have 10 minutes before council.
Let's just wait. Let's try to knock the rest of this out, and then we can do that after council, if you want to wait around. I mean, unless we had. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
So E8, the Park Code of Conduct Policy Discussion. This was one that I had brought up, and I was looking at it because I was thinking about doing the street dances for the restaurant, and so I was reading it through, and we did just pass this, but as I was looking at it closer, I was just thinking that it was kind of, like, it talked more about social media on kind of a lot of stuff, and let me see if I can kind of pull up my stuff here. And I guess you guys don't have that in front of you, I guess, either, so I should have had them attach that, but,
It's in the packet.
is it in the packet?
Yep, I
thought-
put the original policy from 2014 in the packet, as well as the new one that we passed.
Oh, you're right. So this is what we had just passed. Okay, yep, you're right, sorry. I
Resolutions.
just needed to flip over there, so. So I just kind of was reading through it, and there was reasons that we had added this kind of language, and so what it was is it's always been kind of provided to the general public as, guidance on the rules at the street dance, right? But because we had some issues with some vendors where, I don't know all the details, but some inappropriate things were maybe being said, some things were not being done real well, I guess, as they had kind of wanted to extend these rules of conduct to the vendors. But then, so that's why I came across it again, but I was looking at it, and it's violent threats or language, verbal abuse, discriminatory jokes, so this was where I had the posting sexually explicit or violent material, but we're talking about a code of conduct at a street dance, so what is social media?
So the code of conduct, this is not for the street dance, just to clarify,
Well,
Mayor and Council.
you're
This
right,
was just
yeah.
for interaction between the public and staff, and that's what it was, in the intent of it back in 2014. I was here in 2014 when it was adopted. We didn't have city Facebook. I cannot remember if it was the intent of the public's Facebook page, which I wouldn't think it would be, just because it was the interaction between the public and staff. We added vendors to it to ensure that staff had grounds to stand on if they were being treated inappropriately by a vendor, and that we could ask them to leave. That was by my direction to add them when we brought this policy back. I don't know if it would be.
So you're saying that language was in there at that time even?
Correct.
So
So if
that's what
you
we're
look
trying to
at
figure out, yeah.
from the policy from 2014, those bullet points were in there. We didn't change those.
Yep.
At all. So I don't know if it would have been referring to their public Facebook page, because we can't obviously condone what people do on public I think it is just necessary, just posting things, just maybe out like billboard style, I would imagine, but I don't think it was actually social media.
I read it as posting like a picture up at an event or at a park, not necessarily posting on social media. That's how
Yeah.
I read it.
That's how you read it?
Because
Okay.
if people do post on their social media, we don't have any discretion
Well,
on that.
right, and that's kind of what I was,
But if you came to, let's say, the community center, and you had a picture of a staff person inappropriate, we could ask you to put the picture away.
That's how I took it,
That-
posting.
so you were talking posting as far as.
Physical posting of a
Yeah.
piece of paper.
But, I
I
mean,
do believe that that was the intent back then.
really? Okay, all right. Well,
Not to say that this shouldn't be reworded because of what we have today's,
but you can see why I was confused, because I was like, what are we talking about social media for if we're?
yeah. When you sent me that, I was like, we're not. And then I'm like, well, I suppose you could read it that way. But this all started actually with an interaction between a group that was in the community center and city staff. That's how this originated, so.
Okay. Well, so I guess let me kind of go back to my notes on it.
I mean, even if it does mean social media, I don't think it's a bad thing for
Well,
us to say that.
because
we
I mean,
can't.
you wouldn't be able to enforce that, though, is all I'm saying. It's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they must have meant posting,
Physical.
like, actually a physical image, like, on the side of the,
Especially 2014, if that's when it was originally
Yeah.
bulleted, you know?
so. I'm just trying to think of how do you fix it to clarify it?
Physically postings, I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, that was really the only part of it that I was trying to get some clarification on. I just thought it was kind of messy. I don't know. You guys think it's worth changing, or is it fine?
I think it's okay myself.
Just worry about it next time somebody has to deal with it? I mean, because it's, I guess, it's probably not worth the time to mess with.
I'll be honest, I don't think there's one time that we really had to pull this policy and say, see, you
Yeah.
can't talk to staff this way. I mean, we do say it, but I'm not pulling out a piece of paper that says it. But for staff that we do have that works with vendors and are out day in and day out with the public, it is nice for them to feel that there is a backing behind if they have to ask someone to leave, that it's not just them saying it, it takes the weight off their shoulders as an independent employee, but the city has given me authority to say, you need to leave because of your inappropriate behavior.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, if we're interpreting that way, then I'm fine with it. I just thought it was not really making sense in the but in the way that I was looking at posting, well, then it makes sense if you're talking about actually like sticking something on the side of your concession trailer or something like that we don't find appropriate, so. Okay, all right, well, we'll move on from that then. I think that's probably okay. So, yeah, let's go ahead and if we want to make a motion to recess until after the council meeting here, I'll take that.
Make a motion to recess.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilman Merrill and a second from Councilman Holmgren to recess until after the city council meeting adjourns. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned.